This story took place in 1983, at the peak of the Cold War. During those years, the confrontation between the US and the Soviet Union could lead to World War III and the end of humanity. But that didn't happen thanks to one man, Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov. Lieutenant Colonel Petrov served at a secret facility known as Serpukhov 15. There were about 100 people under his command. Their work was to monitor the Soviet nuclear early warning system. In the evening of September 25th, Stanislav Petrov was on duty. At that time, the USSR had a whole network of reconnaissance satellites in orbit. They were sending data on US missile bases to the central computer M10. This giant computer could determine in 1 second the launching location of any missiles, their class, speed, and coordinates. Lieutenant Colonel Petrov was watching the world from the operating room. Green lights on a huge electronic map showed the missile launch facilities of the USSR and the United States. Back then, the US had 9 bases with ballistic missiles. The largest was at Cape Canaveral. Petrov could see what type of missile was being launched at any moment. Usually, the US launched carrier rockets with satellites into space. The situation was under control. But suddenly, at 0:15, an alarm went off and a red sign could be seen on the screen. Start. The M10 showed that a missile with a nuclear warhead was launched from the US. There was no more than 15 minutes left to make a decision and strike back, because the warhead needed exactly 15 minutes to get from the US to the USSR. The lieutenant colonel ordered the analysis team to see if the combat systems were ready. He contacted the visual channel operator to confirm that the warhead had been launched. He was not given an exact answer because the surveillance satellite was in the twilight zone that divides the daylit side and the dark night side of the Earth. Under such conditions, the satellite's information wasn't reliable. The minutes went by. The main staff already knew about the attack. All they needed was Petrov's order. He contacted the analysis team again. The head of the group confirmed the launch. The threat level was severe. But the operators of the visual channel couldn't see the rocket on the monitors, and Petrov was waiting for new data. Perhaps it was a malfunction in the computer program. Knowing that he was going against the rules and could be held accountable, he called his superiors and reported a false alarm. A few minutes later, more exactly 17 and a half minutes later after midnight, the signal sounded again. The computer warned about a second launch. A minute later, there was a third launch, followed by a fourth. Things were escalating quickly. There were more incoming signals. At 0:20, a fifth nuclear missile was supposedly flying towards the USSR. The tension in the operating room was increasing. Lieutenant Colonel Petrov was nervous, but was hiding his feelings from others. Right then, Petrov remembered a story that he heard at military school. In 1962, American planes attacked a Soviet submarine in the Caribbean islands. The submarine hid at the bottom of the ocean and lost contact with the shore. 2 weeks passed, but there were no signals. The submarine commander thought that World War III had begun. He wanted to launch all nuclear-armed missiles towards America. He was stopped by his assistant, who at his own risk offered to rise to the surface. Only then did the soldiers realize that they could have made a fatal mistake. Just like that assistant on the submarine, Commander Petrov didn't want to order a retaliatory strike without being sure. He was waiting for visual confirmation from the local radar operators. Now it all depended on ordinary soldiers who were watching the monitors. The computer data was still not accurate. Petrov contacted the head of the analytical team. The latter claimed that the systems were operational, and the infrared sensors confirmed the launch of the nuclear missiles. Petrov himself was an engineer and understood that the program was not perfect. He believed the computer was wrong and waited. There were only a few minutes left before the missiles entered the radar range. Petrov wondered whether it was worth changing his decision and giving the order to retaliate. The idea that millions of people could die because of him was unbearable. He understood the responsibility, and he knew for sure that he would face a tribunal and execution for his wrong actions. And then he took the only, in his opinion, right decision. He decided to wait until the radar confirmed the error of the systems and the fact that he was right, because he was sure that the alarm was false. Over, negative! The system has failed! No missiles were launched! Only 2 minutes later, which seemed like an eternity to Stanislav Petrov, the radar confirmed that the lieutenant colonel had just made the most important decision, not only in his life, but also in the lives of billions of people. The next morning, Yuri Vatintsyev, commander of the Soviet Air Defense's missile defense units, arrived. He gave Stanislav Petrov a roasting. The State Commission reprimanded the lieutenant colonel because he had not described the incident in the war diary. 10 years later, Colonel General Yuri Vatintsyev apologized to Stanislav Petrov. After the inspection, the State Commission established the reason of the false alarm. It was the failure of the early warning satellites, codename OKO, caused by an imperfection in the military satellites. The Soviet sensors mistook sunlight reflected from the clouds for the launch of an American missile. 2 years later, the OKO system was modified, and in 1985 it was put on combat duty. In 1984, Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov retired. He settled with his family in the town of Fryazino near Moscow. The events at Serpukhov 15 were classified as a state secret until 1993. Even Petrov's wife did not know anything about that day. The role of Stanislav Petrov in the prevention of World War III became public much later. In January 2006, the retired officer was invited to New York. At the UN headquarters, Stanislav Petrov received a crystal statuette in the form of a hand holding a globe. It had the inscription, "To the man who prevented nuclear war." Stanislav Petrov passed away on May 19, 2017. He never boasted about his past. Lieutenant Colonel Petrov was an officer of honor. Even his neighbors did not know that they lived next to the man who stopped World War III.